Hey everyone. So in this video, we're going to talk about another way to implement layered music inside of a game. And we're going to be using RTPCs. That stands for real-time parameter control. It's just a different way of looking at how layered tracks work in a game. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up the Wwise launcher, and then I'm going to launch the current version of Wwise that we're using for the class. It may be different than the one that I'm currently using today. When it opens up, I want to create a new project, and I'm going to call this one Michael Sweet Layered RTPC for real-time parameter control. I'm going to go ahead and add the Mac platform in because developers use Macs and PCs. Then I don't need any of these these factory assets, so I'll select none. I'm putting it on my desktop, so I know where it is. But you can change that using these that three dot button there. Then I'm going to hit OK. That's going to build a Wwise project folder on my desktop called Michael Sweet Layered RTPC. Okay, the license, I don't need a project with more than 200 assets, so I can use the free one. So I can just close this. Now I need to get my layers into Wwise. So I'll go to my Finder. I already have my layers ready to go. And I'm going to insert just one of them first and drag it to the interactive music hierarchy. If you're not seeing what I'm seeing here, make sure you're in the designer layout here and you're on the audio tab. So you drag that into the default work unit. And when we do that, just as a reminder, what it's doing is it's putting that WAV file onto a track, and it's putting that track into a segment. Let's just name things so it's a little clearer for us to see. If it's got one wave here, it means that it's a track, and I can call it a track here. So at the end, oops. Okay, at the end, I'll call this a track. So you'll see it also switches here, although my name is a little bit long. And this is a segment. 2 icons on top, 2 wave files on top means it's a segment. I'll go ahead and change the name of that and call it segment, just so we know what it is. So waves onto tracks, tracks into segments. Cool. All right, now we're actually going to just drag in our second layer to the segment, not the default work unit, and it's going to stack that on top of one another. So I have layer 1 and layer 2, and I'm also going to do that with my third piece. So I'll drag in layer 3 onto the segment, which is going to put it onto another track. I'm going to rename these 2 tracks that I have and put track after it. Cool. So if I play this now, I'll hear all 3 layers on top of one another. Now, next what we need to do is we need to tell Wwise something about our game. And we're going to go to the Game Syncs tab. And we are going to set up a parameter. What is a parameter? A state, let's talk about states first, what we already know. A state kind of goes between, say, in this game it would be between winter and fall and spring and summer, the different seasons that we have. So we go between these states. But here we're going to use a parameter, and a parameter is a number indicator. It can go from it can be the speed that the player is, in a car, they're driving car, and the speed that they're going, or it could be their health. It's some number like 0 to 100. And if I right click on game parameters, I can create a new child game parameter, and I'm going to call this intensity. But it could be, again, it could be like a snowboard and the angle of the snowboard on the mountain, right? It could be lots of different things. So what I'm going to do is when I create it, it tells me what the minimum is and what the maximum is. I'm going to default it when it starts, when the game starts, to 0. So your intensity grows as you play the game. And then I'm going to go back to my audio tab. I'm going to select a track. I'm going to select the second track. I want the first track to always play. So I'm going to select the second track, and then I'm going to go to the RTPC tab, and then make a new RTPC. So I'll click this double arrow. I'm going to control the voice volume of track 2 using the game parameter intensity. So I have intensity, and then my screen's really small right now, so I kind of have to open this part up. And then as the intensity grows, I want the volume to go up, which it kind of does, but I want it to go up quicker. So let's say I double click and add a point here, and somewhere between 20 and 30, then my volume starts to rise. So as my intensity starts to go up, my volume goes up like this. It's very much like using automation inside of Pro Tools or Reaper or whatever DAW you use. All right, let's do the same for track 3. So track 3, we want to add an RTPC that is controlled, that controls the voice volume. And it's controlled by the game parameter intensity. And as the intensity rises, and let's say we want up to 50, it to remain at minus 200 dB. And then sometime between 50 and 60, I'll double click, add a point. I want it to raise up to full volume. All right, so next I go back to my segment here, and I'm going to select game parameters, which is this icon here in the transport. And you can see that I can control it here, over here. So I'll start with 0. I'll hit play. And I'm going to hear track 1 right now. You can see these little orange markers here. That means that something is controlling these tracks. Something's controlling the volume, in which case is the RTPC. So if I start raising up the intensity, remember when I get to 20, it's going to start adding layer 2. So it's adding layer 2. Then as I get into the 50s, it's going to add in layer 3. So this is the fall music, early fall, minimalist. And then as my intensity starts to drop, it's going to remove those strings, and I'll be left with just the harp and the strings. Or I could go back up and add in the rest, where there's some woodwinds too in here someplace, some piano. And then my intensity goes back down, and we end up with just the frigid violin. And that's it. Segments do not loop on their own, so that probably the last part of this that I would do is to right-click, new parent, and then put it in a playlist and call it my layered. Actually, I'll probably call it what it is. In this case, it's early fall playlist. Playlists have 2 steps in their construction. One is to get the hierarchy, which I just did, but the second, you can see it's still empty here. I need to pull my segment out and then repeat it infinitely, so it just repeats. And then when I play this, I get the same thing. It will start playing that segment, and as I build intensity, it's going to start bringing those other tracks. And then as I pull this down, it will go back to 1 track. And that's it. That explains how to use layers with these things called RTPCs, real-time parameter controls, Let me know if you have any questions.